this was a really weird random idea that I kind of came up with when it could be like for a rewrite possibility, or if they ever restart Ruby completely to do this. I was just thinking over like one of the things that me and my mates all agree on, and I think a large portion of the fandom could possibly agree on at this point. What we've seen in Volume 7 of the Elysian military is just garbage. It's like it's a huge military force that does fuck all and is very inefficient in combat. And from what we've seen, from what little we've seen of Volume 8, it's not going to get better. This military is going to be quite horrible to watch. And my thought for this is stemming to a world building directive as well as a narrative directive for Ruby. And when I was going over this, it was basically, should Atlas even have a military at this point? Because Atlas having a military comes across as negative in general. Because uh, we know that there was a war 80 years ago, and then following the war to present day, Atlas is the only country with a military. So it's like 80 years after essentially a world war, three the other three countries have got rid of their military. They don't have an army anymore. And it just seems odd because they had like their version of the United Nations where the King of Vale took them to that island to bloody go anti-slavery, right? But when they sat down and they're, rebuilding the world, the academies and everything, for some reason, three countries have got rid of their armies, and Atlas just sat there, despite being the losers of the war, and said, "Nah, we're keeping our fucking army, and if anything, it's gonna get even more advanced than it already was." Which honestly begs the question that the only reason Atlas lost the war was because the King of Vale had uh, magic and divine instruments. But that's getting off subject. My point is, based on that, if the other three countries are going to get rid of their armies, then technically Atlas should have got rid of theirs anyway, because this would have been the whole purpose of the schools in this world. If you're creating a stability of peace, getting rid of all armies is a step to that, as well as building these schools which focus in on killing the Grimm. The Grimm are supposed to be the primary enemy in Remnant. Like, regardless, before you find out Salem, before you find out Cinder's doing her shit, this is a world that's been tormented by Grimm for friggin' thousands of years. These are the ultimate. They should be the most common evil in the series. So they build the academies, and it's why I kind of get the shits when I look at the other countries, because I'm like, well, Vale. Imagine during the Vital tournament if Atlas never showed up with their army. I know the army got hacked, but imagine if they didn't show up at all. It was just like, they still would have lost. Why? Because what we saw on screen is maybe 20 to 30 huntsmen fighting an invasion army. It just doesn't work. But this is what, the story's going for. So each country has these schools, each country is training these huntsmen to fight the Grimm, which begs the. And then you get to Atlas, and in order to make the military work, they're like, oh, the Elysian huntsman, in most situations, because now that we're here, we've discovered so many of them just go off and do whatever the fuck. Look at Robin. She's not in the military. What Weiss, she's ready to fuck off to Vale and live her life there. She doesn't give a fuck. You see so many people just fuck off, and you're like, how many people are actually graduating the Atlas Academy? And is it part of their law? If you graduate from the Atlas Academy, you have to sign into the military and do so many years service. None of that exists. Like, we don't know any of this shit of how the country works. So I was just like, if you take the huntsman from the Atlas Academy, and even if they graduate top of their class, they perfect all their abilities, they become really good huntsmen, and then you stick them in the military, it makes you raise the questions. These questions get raised. One of my questions straight off the bat is, every single person that's in the Elysian military, why don't they have their aura unlocked? Any idiot can have their aura unlocked. It's not something that's hard to do. If one person has their aura unlocked, they can walk up to any other friggin' individual, go ding da ding da ding, and boom, person has their aura. They might have to train it a bit, but think of it from a military aspect. Imagine having a military where every single troop has a force field. And the fact that we're watching the show, and you got this military where it's just like, oh, they all wear the same stuff. So, you know how you're watching the Grimm and you're like, the Grimm suck? Like, the Grimm just are fucking shit. Unless they outnumber the enemy 1,000,000,000. These creatures just suck ass. They're boring. The Elysian military is the same way, because every single troop is dressed the same in the same gear, right? They get given these shitty guns that don't do shit. I mean, imagine living in a world where it's like, oh, why did we build this military? To kill the Grimm. What weapons do we give you? Weapons that don't do any damage to the Grimm. We've seen it in Volume 7. We saw an airship fire rockets. And it's the exact same animation in the rockets that the Aesop chick uses with her hammer rocket launcher. It's the exact same rockets, except hers kill the friggin' Grimm, and the Elysian Fleet's rockets don't do any damage to the Grimm. And then you get all the troops with their laser rifles, and it's like watching Warhammer. It's like, oh, the Imperium man, he's a las gun. It's a piece of shit. It does fuck all. In large numbers, maybe, but it's just like, I make fun of the Imperial Guard in Warhammer. They're pieces of shit. And it's like watching that in Atlas. It's like you're asking yourself, why? The problem, look, in Warhammer, the reason it works is kind of everything's so overpowered. Like, you can look at a Space Marine and go, that thing is a beast. And yet, it can easily die. A Space Marine can easily die because every other race is strong as shit as well. They really balance themselves out. The Elysian military doesn't have that. It's just like, here's shitty weaponry, here's shitty armor. Oh yeah, we have aura in this world. Nah, you're not getting that. God help, none of you are gonna get a semblance. I mean, if the main characters in the show have shitty semblances, don't think for a second we're giving, like, mass-produced clones bloody... I know they're not clones. What I mean is how you animate them come across as clones. But this is my point in general. Atlas doesn't need a military, because it just doesn't work. When you're watching the show, I don't think Ruby understand or even have the budget to make a military work. It's like you go watch Full Metal Alchemist and you see all the alchemists and, the army in use. You go watch all other anime and you'll see armies in use. Even if they're serving their purpose, they fight. Like Saga of Tanya the Evil. They show how armies have to be used. All I'm suggesting is that for the sake of the show, if they ever do a reboot, the idea, get rid of the Elysian military. It's not a plot point anymore. We don't need a friggin' country that's like, oh, look, isn't this country interesting? It has a military. It can still be a science-based country. Like, it can still be more advanced. They just, what if they're just all like scientists? Have you seen the My Hero Academia movie, the first one? They go to a friggin' island where it's high tech as shit. That's basically fucking Atlas. It's high tech as shit, and it's just full of scientists who are working on high tech shit. It could be that the huntsmen that come from Atlas have extremely high-tech weaponry. They don't need to build it because you know how like Ruby and Yang build their friggin' weapons, right? Well, the Elysians don't need to because the scientists that work there build them really high-grade shit. Instead, you're telling us this is a highly advanced nation, and then you show us their military that does fuck all, does no damage. And all of a sudden, both concepts just don't work because they're not advanced if their weapons don't do any damage. Like, I think that's not me bitching, it's just a common sense pickup. It's like 1 plus 1 has to equal 2, and instead 1 plus 1 is equal 0 because it does fuck all. So that was just a thought that I had, like, it, because Rooster Teeth's in a really bad way at the moment. Staff getting fired, all different allegations, multiple people. God knows what happens to Ruby. It almost seems like they're writing like they say they already finished Volume 9 writing already, and they haven't even finished like animating or releasing Volume 8 yet. So it almost seems like they're rushing through it now. It's like they're saying, "Oh, we're ahead. We're ahead. We're so proud of ourselves." It seems like you're rushing through it to write it all, so at least, you know, if it does get dropped or it gets cancelled because of Rooster Teeth's situation currently, that at least there's some notes somewhere. That's honestly what it seems like, and I know this is going to be a really unpopular opinion, and I know a lot of people are not going to like this because the fanatics want Rooster Teeth to continue. I personally hope that with all the shit that's going on, all the shit that's happened to Rooster Teeth in 2020, I hope all this shit continues in 2021 with Rooster Teeth. That, I don't know, if we find out worse shit about some of their employees, or maybe their business practices get even worse, or they're charging more for merch, or maybe Volume 8, it just doesn't deliver and fans are pissed off. I actually hope this happens because if that happens, there's a higher chance of it getting cancelled. And if that also happens, one way Rooster Teeth might be able to make money is selling the Ruby IP to another studio. They sell the IP, they make money off that. Another studio with a bigger budget gets to make this show. They already have 7 years of friggin' information. They got a friggin' law book. They got so much shit they can run with. If anything, we've seen at Shonen Jump, we've seen manga, we've seen so many people, we've seen fans be able to rewrite this shit. So at this time, I not only with all these rewrite ideas, all these little things that pop up, you've seen other people like Celtic Phoenix is doing his rewrite. There's so much information out there that the best positive thing I can say, ending this video for 15 minutes, is Ruby is a good idea because it's full of so many ideas. It's just really, really badly executed ideas. And that's just a studio that doesn't have it in it. It doesn't have it. We're 8 years in and we realize they can't even deliver a friggin' like full invasion. Like, they can handle an invasion in 3 episodes, like Beacon. They can't handle an invasion over 13 episodes. And that's why, like, and before you ask yourself, just think for a second. If you have a favorite anime out there, if it's like, if you like Studio Bones, if you like Studio Mappa, all these really crazy studios that have made some of the most beautiful friggin' anime recently. Imagine if any of them bought Ruby Ruby disappears for about a year or two, and the studios are like, "Oh, we're gonna change this, 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 and this." Then they get to animating it. They're gonna be doing it in friggin' 2D animation, most likely. Imagine that shit brought to life, and then it's like you're getting 24 episodes for a season, and you're gonna get like 3 or 4 seasons of the show, telling an insane story. It's like I reckon that's better for Monty's legacy. In all honesty, it's like the people who did work on Ruby at Rooster Teeth, they got experience, they grew, and now they can go out and do whatever the hell they want. A lot of the animators are already doing it. And then the show's IP gets picked up and gets turned into something beautiful by someone else in the anime community. At that point, I think that's the best thing going forward. Um, so yeah, Atlas doesn't need a military. If anything, the military is what's hurting the show because the studio doesn't know how to write them. Your thoughts?